اللهم صل على المصطفى نبي الرسالة وبحر الصفا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. يا رب بالمصطفى بلغ مقاصدنا واغفر لنا ما مضى يا واسع الكرم. نويت التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. Alhamdulillah, all praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and peace and blessings be upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and all of the prophets and messengers and his family and his companions, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this blessing of being in his house, to remember the greatest of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to remember those that are beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only allows those that are beloved to him to remember those that are beloved to him. And so alhamdulillah, it's a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's love and mercy upon us that he is allowing us to remember those that are beloved to him azza wa jal. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he allows us to be with them in this world in remembrance and in following in their way, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala joins us with them on the day of judgment. And the individual that we're talking about today is Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu. And just the name of Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu, it gives you a state of awe and fear. Just the name of Sayyidina Umar. You know, I'm already feeling scared about talking about Sayyidina Umar. I'm thinking, what will Sayyidina Umar say to me on the day of judgment? You know, what did you say about me? So from the outset, you know, we declare that we are deficient in speaking about such a great personality. That personality whose views were in line with the wahi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we're going to come upon cases where what Sayyidina Umar used to think and his suggestions to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would be corroborated by revelation by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran itself. That's Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu. And we're talking about the individual who gave strength to the Muslims, and we're talking about that individual who's called the Murad of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's who we're talking about. So Sayyidina Umar is a great individual. And when we will go into first and foremost about his name and his lineage and his description, radiyallahu anhu, and Imam al-Dhahabi and Imam al-Nawawi, they report that Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu, he was born in the 13th year after the year of the elephant. In other words, he was younger than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by 13 years. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born in the year of the elephant. 13 years later, Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu was born. And he was from the Quraysh. From amongst his nicknames, he was called Abu Hafs. Abu Hafs. And Hafs is one of the, from amongst the names of a lion in the Arabic language. In the Arabic language, there are 300 names for a lion. That's Arabic for you. 300 names for a lion. You know, people think that they can understand the Quran and the Hadith. Tell them first to learn the 300 names for a lion and then speak about what the Quran and the Hadith means. What's the difference between Asad and Hamza and Hafs? Explain that first and then tell me you understand the Quran and the Hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 300 names. From amongst them is Hafs. And this leads us to a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is narrated by the great scholar Ibn Abi Jamrah al-Maliki on his commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari. And he mentions a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ mentions the Khulafa al-Rashideen, the 4 Khulafa al-Rashideen. And he says that the Prophet ﷺ says, I am the city of munificence, in other words, generosity, giving. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq babuha. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is its door. You've heard of the hadith, أنا مدينة العلم وعلي بابها. You've heard of that hadith. This is a complete version of that hadith. So he says that I am the city of munificence, generosity, giving. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is its door. And he says, I am the city of shuja'ah, bravery. And Sayyidina Umar is its door. Wa Umar babuha. And then he says, I am the city of iffa, meaning restraint, meaning haya, what we call haya, bashfulness. And he says, Sayyidina Uthman is its door. And then he ends by saying, وَأَنَا مَدِينَةُ الْعِلْمِ وَعَلِيٌّ بَابُهَا. Yeah? So the Prophet ﷺ, this element, Abu Hafs, this title that the Prophet ﷺ gives him as a nickname, is a testimony of the bravery of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. That he was given this title by the Prophet ﷺ. And they say two things about this. Number one, that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he names somebody with a name, he gives them that quality as well. Yeah. So one of the karamas of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the bravery of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Or they say if somebody already has that quality, then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam naming them or mentioning that quality beautifies it and brings it up to an even greater degree. So with Sayyidina Umar, he was already known for his bravery. By the Prophet ﷺ giving his stamp of approval, he brings the bravery of Sayyidina Umar to another level. And this is why we see when Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu becomes a Muslim, it changes the situation of Islam and the Muslims. Just by him becoming a Muslim. Changes the community. How the Muslims are now treated. Yeah. And we see, I'm jumping a bit here. But we see that they say about the migration of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he's the only one who openly migrated. Yeah. That he comes out and he says to the people of Mecca, I'm going to migrate to Madinatul Munawwara, I'm going. And he says, whoever wants their wife to be widowed and their children to be orphaned, come and meet me outside. Let's deal with this outside of Mecca. Yeah. I'm going, if you've got a problem, come outside, we'll deal with it like men. That was Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Yeah. Now when we look, what occurred to me when I came across this hadith is when we're looking at the Prophet ﷺ, by this hadith he is declaring that if you want to approach the Prophet ﷺ in his totality and his complete nature, you cannot acquire the Prophet ﷺ without these four. Without these four, you cannot arrive at the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. You need all four doorways open to arrive at the completeness of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yes, if you only cling to Sayyidina Ali karramallahu wajhul kareem, yes, without a doubt, you will have a portion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but you won't have access to all of him. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is such that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept our belief in him until we accept the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his totality. Yeah? How many letters does the word Muhammad have in it? 4 letters. Mim, ha, mim, dal. If you say La ilaha illallah, mim Rasulullah, is that enough? Mim ha Rasulullah, mim ha mim Rasulullah, not enough. Until you say Muhammad, until you take all 4 letters, until you take the Prophet ﷺ in his totality, until you accept all 4 of the Imams as doorways of access to the Prophet ﷺ, your iman in Allah and the Prophet ﷺ is not complete. You cannot have the Prophet ﷺ if you have issues with Sayyidina Abu Bakr and as-Siddiq or Sayyidina Umar or Sayyidina Uthman, Sayyidina Ali karramallahu wajhul kareem. Not possible. Yeah. So it's a beautiful hadith. And this really shows first and foremost the qualities of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, but the relationship of the 4 with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. And how they're all one. Don't try and split them apart. Don't try and separate them. Don't try and make out that there was division between them. A'udhu billah. Yeah, this was a beautiful, like the Prophet ﷺ has drawn this image that I am this great city of these great qualities and these are the points of entry. These are the doorways. Yeah, it's a beautiful image that the Prophet ﷺ draws. From amongst his names is Al-Faruq. And Al-Faruq means that which differentiates between truth and falsehood. Yeah. That the Prophet ﷺ said that wherever Sayyidina Umar goes, the truth follows him. Yeah? The truth follows Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. He didn't say he is on the side of the truth. He said the truth is on the side of Sayyidina Umar. Yeah. So Al-Faruq, and what the scholars mention here is that it's the greatest purpose of the intellect. What is the greatest purpose of the intellect? Is to know what's right from what's wrong. And we know in this day and age itself how difficult that is. How many issues do we have where we think, are we allowed to do this? Are we allowed to do that? Can I do this? Can I do that? Sayyidina Umar al-Faruq radiallahu anhu was that differentiator. You could tell what was right from what was wrong just by following Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And then the final title that we come across, and these are just some of them, is Amirul Mu'mineen. Yeah, Amirul Mu'mineen meaning the prince or the leader of the believers. Yeah, this was the title given to Sayyidina Umar, and he was the first to be given that title. The Prophet ﷺ was Rasulullah, the Messenger of Allah. Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was Khalifatu Rasulillah. He was the representative of the Prophet ﷺ. And then Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu became Amir al-Mu'mineen, the prince of the believers. When we look at his lineage, he joins the 8th grandfather, Sayyidina Ka'ab bin Lu'ay, with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So he's Qurayshi. He's from the Qurayshi tribe similar to the Prophet ﷺ, and he's from one of the 12 clans within the Qurayshi tribe called Banu Adi. And Banu Adi, they were known even before Islam to be the individuals who would be called to judicate and judge in issues. If there was a problem, if there was an issue, they would call them Banu Adi. And the grandfather of Sayyidina Umar, Nufayl, he was somebody who had a very close relationship with the grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ as well. So he would judge, and he would, if anybody had an issue with Sayyidina Abdul Muttalib, Sayyidina Abdul Muttalib would summon Nufayl, the grandfather of Sayyidina Umar, to be the judge between those people. So the connection of Sayyidina Umar goes a long way back with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, just as we saw with Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu as well. If we look at his description, then the description of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu is that he was extremely dark in complexion. Sayyidina Umar was what we call Shadid al-Udma. He was extremely dark. And he was extremely tall. If we look at the descriptions, we're talking about 8 foot tall. And we mentioned this before, that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, they say that when he used to sit on a horse, his feet would be touching the ground. Yes, some of us, if any of us have gone horse riding, we need a ladder to get on top of the horse. We find it difficult, or you need somebody to pick you up or carry you or give you a hand to get on top of the horse. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, when he used to get onto the horse, his feet used to actually touch the ground. And that's why he was known as the Mukhattatun. The people who, they used to call them the line drawers. That when Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu used to sit on a horse, if he didn't lift his legs and the horse was to ride, it would create 2 lines on either side of the horse. 1 line on either side. He used to draw lines with his feet in the sand. Radiallahu anhu. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he's known in his lifetime to have married a number of times. And this is the quality of some of the Sahabah al-Kiram. You'll see that they married a number of times. And some people see this as a criticism, and they think, they project their shahawat upon the Sahaba, and they think, well, if I was to get married lots of times, it would have been for my shahawat, fulfillment of my desires, and so they did it for that same reason. That's not the case. The kind of understanding of marriage in that day and age was very different to how it is now. For a woman to get married and then divorced and then get married again, it wasn't an issue. And many of the Sahaba al-Kiram, they would marry women that had been divorced, sometimes divorced a number of times, sometimes widowed a number of times, and it wasn't an issue whatsoever. But 3 specifically, prior to Islam, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he marries Qariba bint Abu Umayyah al-Makhzumi, Zainab bint Mad'un, and from amongst the other wives of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, later on, that's worthy of mention, is Kulthum, the daughter of Sayyidina Ali and Sayyidina Fatima radiallahu anha. So Sayyidina Ali marries his daughter Sayyidatuna Kulthum radiallahu anha to Sayyidina Umar. And that's worthy of mention. Yeah, you get the point. Yeah, so if anybody has issues with the son-in-law of Sayyidina Ali, then they can speak to Sayyidina Ali himself, inshallah. Yeah. This is the son-in-law, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And so from specifically Sayyidatuna Zainab bint Mad'un, she gives birth to Sayyidatuna Hafsa, who's the wife of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Yeah. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar, and Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar is one of the most profound of the youth in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He's called Habrul Ummah. Yeah, that he's called like the scholar of the Ummah, and he's known for his tafsir. One of the most prolific ulama of the Sahabah al-Kiram. Even in his young age, he had surpassed many of the older Sahaba in knowledge. And this was from the tarbiyah of Sayyidina Umar for his son Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, most of his life, he grew up in the masjid. With the Ashab al-Sufa. That was the tarbiyah. Sayyidina Umar kicked him out of the house more or less. Go and live in the masjid. Go and spend time there. And this is an important point, in terms of tarbiyah, in terms of raising children, that from a young age we need to attach our children to the masajid, to the majalis, to the ulama, to the awliya, to the salihin. That should be their regular habit and routine. And the masajid should be welcoming to the youth. There should be places where the youth feel welcomed. It's very important as well. So it's a two-way relationship. So Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar, he grows up there. He's so advanced in terms of his knowledge that after or near the end of the Khilafah of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, the Sahaba, the older Sahaba, they were pressuring Sayyidina Umar to make his son Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar the Khalif after him. Imagine how, you had Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, you still had Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajhul kareem, but you had a group of the Sahaba, a strong group of them, asking Sayyidina Umar to make Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar the Khalif after him. That's how much they considered him. And on this point, it refutes some of the claims about Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu that people make, that he was power hungry and he wanted power for himself, etc., etc. Sayyidina Umar refused. He didn't allow his son to be the next Khalif. To the extent that when there were 7 people elected or chosen by Sayyidina Umar to choose the next Khalif, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar was one of the 7 to be a part of that committee, but he said he cannot be one of them. In other words, he can help to choose, but he himself cannot be chosen. There's only 6 candidates. He refused. He barred Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar from even being considered for the Khilafah. And when they asked him why, he said, it's enough that from my family I have to answer for this affair on the Day of Judgment. Look at Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. That's what you call a leader. His fear of being questioned about the amana of leadership. Now people publicize themselves, market themselves. They're going out begging people to vote for them and become the leader of a people. They don't understand what they're doing. You don't ask for leadership. Because you're asking basically to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment and be questioned for the affairs of your entire population. It's all on your neck. To the extent that Sayyidina Umar during his Khilafah radiallahu anhu, he said, I fear Allah that He will question me about a donkey that's within the lands that I'm ruling over. Animals even. That's how much khawf and taqwa the leaders had, and that's why they were so successful. If you want leaders, those are the kind of leaders that you want. He didn't oppress people. He didn't use his strength to make people obey his rule. No, he served them. Can you imagine the likes of Sayyidina Umar serving people, going around in the streets? He used to go around, he had patched clothing, ripped. His clothing would be ripped, radiallahu anhu, patched up. Have you ever heard of a leader in this day and age like that? And that's why, because they don't behave like they did, they don't have the same impact as they did. What impact do they have? Who likes them? Who wants their leadership to carry on? Most leaders, the population's making dua, Ya Allah, please take his life. When we're going to get rid of him, please. When we're going to finish with this one? this tyrant, this oppressor. We've had enough of him. He's taken all of our wealth. We're going through financial issues. Ya Allah, take him away. When will his janazah come? The likes of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, people wept and cried, and when he was martyred, they saw that as one of the greatest calamities ever to afflict Islam. And that's what it was. It was an immense calamity. When we look at the upbringing of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, really when you want to see what makes somebody great, you have to look at the ingredients and the upbringing that makes them that great person. They don't become great overnight. They don't become great by chance. There's something that takes place in their childhood, their upbringing, their education, their environment that develops them in that way. And we see that in the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah chose for his upbringing to be difficult. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a difficult upbringing. And this is where we again take from the tarbiyah of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, that mollycoddling our children, wrapping them in cotton wool, giving them no responsibility, doing everything for them is the worst thing you can do for your child. It's the worst thing. Because if that was the best thing, Allah would have facilitated that for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would have facilitated for him to have an easy life if that was good for him. But no. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went through hardship, difficulty. And so Sayyidina Umar here, his father was extremely firm, very strict. I'm not saying that we as fathers need to be harsh and strict with our children, but what we definitely need to do is have boundaries. What we definitely need to do is have discipline. What we definitely need to do is have tough love, where we shower our children with love and affection and attention and presence in terms of time and all of those kinds of things. But at the same time, when our child makes a mistake, whether it's a boy or a girl, it's another point to mention here. And not that we're strict with our girls and lax with our boys. Whether it's a boy or a girl, that we show them the correct way and we discipline them and we bring them up to be strong, upright Muslims who have the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this is what gave Sayyidina Umar that kind of very tough nature, Sayyidina Umar. And he was tough upon himself. Let's not think Sayyidina Umar was this tyrant. We have this image of Sayyidina Umar as being very strong, but he wasn't a tyrant to others. He was strong against himself. He really admonished himself and kept himself in check. He was gentle with others, Sayyidina Umar, as long as there was room for gentleness. Otherwise, Sayyidina Umar is well known to take his sword out at any moment to defend the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That it reminds me of a saying that I read recently by there's like a modern writer. His name is Dave Kekich, and he says, life's easy when you live it the hard way, and it's hard when you live it the easy way. I'll just repeat that. He says life is easy when you live it the hard way. In other words, if your upbringing is difficult and it's with responsibility, and you have to strive and work for what you have, then later on your life becomes easy. But if you always have it easy at the beginning, later on when you become an adult and now you have to take on responsibility and you're in a marriage and you have to look after your wife and children, it's very difficult for you now. Because you don't know how to behave. You've never had responsibility to deal with. Your mum has always taken care of you. You've always been a little baby even though you're 25 and 35 years old. Still a little baby. And then you're wrapped and handed over to your wife to look after you. When will you ever be able to shoulder responsibility and be a man? Being a man isn't easy. So we're not men when it comes to taking our rights, and we're not men when it comes to fulfilling our responsibilities. If we're going to be a man, then we're a man through and through, with our rights and our responsibilities. And that's what you see in Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And so one of the other qualities of Sayyidina Umar is that he had a lack of fear of people. He did not care about the criticism. Like we mentioned before, that when it came to the migration, or when it came to him accepting Islam, that he did not hold back. He didn't care what people may say or even what people may do to him. We know that the early generations of Muslims, they had it very difficult. They were persecuted, they were harmed, their wealth was taken, they were evicted, they had embargoes against them just for being Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ had the intestines of animals thrown on him whilst he was worshipping in front of the Kaaba. It was not easy. You know, Sayyidina Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anhu was chained by his mother, imprisoned by his own mother for becoming a Muslim. This is what they had to go through. So they lived a life of secrecy in their Islam in the early stages. Sayyidina Umar, very open. But there's an interesting dream. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu is somebody who appears often in the dreams of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the dreams of the Sahabah as well. Can you imagine that? We dream about seeing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in our dreams. Who does the Prophet dream about? He used to have dreams about Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Now we'll go through some of the dreams. But this dream which relates to this quality of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, that Sayyidina Auf ibn Malik al-Khuza'i, he says that he saw a dream. And this is in the Khilafah of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, near the end of the Khilafah of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. And he goes to Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu and he says, Ya Khalifati Rasulillah, I saw a dream of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And he says, narrate it, because Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was known to be able to interpret dreams, to give their meanings. It's a quality inherited from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he says, I saw that we're on the Day of Judgment. And there's a great gathering of people around an individual. And this individual is 3 arms length above everybody else. Yeah? He's tall, you know, he's a giant compared to everybody else. And so I asked, who is this man? And the reply came to me, this is Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And he said, I asked, why is he so tall compared to everybody else? And the response came because of 3 qualities. He said, number 1, لا يخاف لومة لائم. He does not care about the criticism of people. And this is a very important point, especially in our Indo-Pak subcontinent culture. Whenever we make a decision, whenever we think of doing something, what do we say? What would people say? Yeah. When we're looking at marriages, for example, you know, when our daughters or our sons want to get married and we're not really happy, why are we not happy? Is it because of Islam? Is it an Islamic quality that we're refusing the Rishtan? No, what would people say? They're from such and such a clan, or they're from such and such a tribe, or they're from such and such a country, or etc. etc. What will people say is our response. And this is why Sayyidina Umar has this rank on the Day of Judgment. He doesn't care what people say. He cares what the Lord of people will say. Who created you? Who do you answer to? Who are you going to stand before on the Day of Judgment? Who provides for you? Who sustains you? And you're going to care about the rest of the creation who are just like you? They have no right over you to question you. They're not going to judge you. They're not going to put you into Jannah or Jahannam. So we don't look at what Allah will say, we look at what the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say. And then the next point that he mentions, the second quality, he says that he is the one, he is Khalifatul Mustakhlaf, that he is the one who will be appointed as a Khalif by the Khalif before him. And he is the only one, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, who is appointed by Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. There's no election here. There's no group to consider. Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq says, after me it's going to be Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh. Full stop. Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq wasn't appointed by the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sayyidina Uthman wasn't appointed radiallahu anh by Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh. Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajhul kareem wasn't appointed by Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anh. Sayyidina Umar, the only one appointed by Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, the Khalif before him. And then the third point he mentions, he says, وَهُوَ شَهِيدَ الْمُسْتَشْهَدِ, that he is going to be a martyr who seeks out martyrdom. He actually wants to be a martyr. Yeah. So Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh says to this Sahabi, he says, will you not give Sayyidina Umar the glad tidings? Call him, tell him the dream. It's a good dream. Give him glad tidings. So Sayyidina Umar is called. And again, in the presence of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq commands Sayyidina Auf bin Malik. He says, tell him the dream. And so he says, I saw a dream and I saw you on the Day of Judgment. And these 3 qualities were mentioned about you. The first, that you do not fear the criticism of criticizers. And the second, that you are the Khalif who is appointed by the Khalif before you. When he said this second point, Sayyidina Umar said, stop. He said, how dare you mention that while Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is still alive? And he walked away. Didn't let him finish the dream. Says, you're basically telling me about the demise of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and that I'm going to be appointed after him. Be quiet, I'm not listening to your dream. And he walked away, Sayyidina Umar walked away, didn't want to listen to the rest of the dream. Later on, where after Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was veiled from this world and Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh became the Khalif, there was a point Sayyidina Auf bin Malik mentions that I was walking past the masjid and Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh was the Khatib. He was on the mimbar and he saw me and he called me over. And he called me over and he says, now finish the dream. Yeah. Look at the adab with Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Look at that adab. How dare you even mention that I'm going to be the next leader while Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is still alive? How are you even mentioning that? But now that Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq has passed on, he says complete the dream. And he says, I mentioned the third point, that you're going to be a shaheed al-mustashhad, that you're going to be a martyr. Sayyidina Umar says, where am I going to get martyrdom from? I'm in the midst of Madinah al-Munawwara and I send out the armies to the rest of the world. I'm confined to Medina to run the affairs of the Ummah. How am I going to be a shaheed here? But Sayyidatuna Hafsa radiallahu anha, the daughter of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, she mentions that many a times I heard my father making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, grant me martyrdom. And he used to say, if Allah has willed it to be, then it will come to me whilst I'm still in Madinah al-Munawwara. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah, he was martyred. Yeah. And it shows you the kind of rank of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh. When we look at the acceptance of Islam of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, what's important to understand here is that when we're looking at the Sahabah al-Kiram, in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're always beloved. Yeah. Even when they were in kufr, they were beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not affected by time. Yeah. Allah doesn't see Sayyidina Umar as Umar now, and then Umar tomorrow, and then Umar by the end of his life. Allah knows Sayyidina Umar in his totality. Allah knows his reality. Yeah. There is no time with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these Sahabah, even when they were not Muslim, they were still beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why they're in Jannah and their houses are already built in Jannah before they've even left this world. We know about Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anh, his footsteps in Jannah. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, his palace, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says when he went on the Isra wal Mi'raj, he saw his palace in Jannah. Yeah. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, but I didn't enter. And he said, Ya Rasulullah, why didn't you enter? He said, I know your ghayra. I know about your ghayra. I don't know, how do you translate ghayra into English? Yeah. But those who understand Urdu, they understand ghayrat. Yeah. His kind of like... Yeah. Ghayrat. What you call ghayrat in Urdu. But a person's kind of... his awe and presence. That's probably the closest we'll get. His awe and presence. And Sayyidina Umar wept when he heard that from the Prophet ﷺ. He wept. Ya Rasulullah, I'm basically me and everything that I possess is yours. That was his understanding. And so, as was mentioned, mashallah, before I even started, that Sayyidina Umar accepted Islam when there was 40 men and 11 women had accepted Islam. Yeah. So he's from the very early Muslims. But that was the size of the community at that time of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh. And it's mentioned, and it's a famous narration in At-Tirmidhi, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam made dua for the Islam of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh. Yeah. And it was a dua in which he joined Sayyidina Umar and Abu Jahl. Yeah. Both of those, that, oh Allah, strengthen Islam by one of these two. Look at the dua of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Strengthen Islam by the Islam of these two. And this is something that we see as well, that the Prophet ﷺ was sometimes, even though Islam was open to everybody and his da'wah was for everyone, the Prophet ﷺ was very strategic at times as to who he particularly aimed his da'wah to. Because he knew that if this individual becomes a Muslim, it will strengthen the position of the Muslims. Or because of his Islam, many others that follow him will also become Muslims as well. Yeah. So looking at people of influence and inclining them towards Islam is the way of da'wah within the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is why the scholars call Sayyidina Umar the murad of the Prophet ﷺ. The murad means the one who is sought. A murid is the one who is seeking. Yeah? So they say everybody was a murid of the Prophet ﷺ. They were seeking the Prophet ﷺ. But Sayyidina Umar was the murad of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He was the one who the Prophet ﷺ was longing for and wanted to enter into Islam. Yeah. So there's the narration that the Sayyidina Umar narrates himself. There's two incidents, and one is that he went to confront the Prophet ﷺ. And when he went to confront the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ was reciting the Quran. And when the Prophet ﷺ was reciting the Quran, he was overtaken by its eloquence and beauty. And he said to himself, what kind of magic is this that the Quraysh have got here? Meaning the Prophet ﷺ specifically. And as soon as he said that, the Prophet ﷺ recited, إِنَّهُ لَقَوْلُ رَسُولٍ كَرِيمٍ وَمَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِ شَاعِرٍ قَلِيلًا مَا تُؤْمِنُونَ. Yeah? In translation, it is truly the saying of a noble messenger. So Sayyidina Umar is thinking in himself, this is magic. And the Prophet ﷺ recites, it is truly the saying of a noble messenger, and it is not the saying of a sorcerer or a poet. How little do you believe? Almost directly addressing the state of Sayyidina Umar at that time. And it said that was the first point of entry of Islam into his heart. Yeah. That was the first kind of crack of the idol worship that was in his heart, and the niche of light entering into his heart, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. But the main narration is the famous one, when on one occasion, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he says, that's it, I've had enough. This is before Islam. That this individual, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, has the audacity to continue spreading Islam. We're telling him to stop and he's not listening. I'll take the matter into my own hands. I'm going to deal with this myself. And he goes out with his sword with the intention of assassinating and killing the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. That's his intention. He goes out with that intention. Yeah. And when he goes, one of the Sahabah from Banu Zuhra who hadn't declared and openly stated his Islam, he sees Sayyidina Umar going with a purpose, with a sword in his hand. And he says, where are you going? And he says, I'm going to deal with Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. I'm going to dispatch his affair now. Had enough. And he says, are you going to go and deal with him when your own household isn't in order? In other words, sort your household out first before you go and look at others. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, your sister's accepted Islam. He changes his tract and he goes to the house of his sister. And when he approaches the door, he can hear the recitation of the Quran. So he more or less breaks the door down and enters, and he strikes his brother-in-law, and he also strikes his sister as well, to the extent that she bleeds. And he says, give me what you are reciting. And she says, no. She says, you're not clean. And only those that are clean can hold this word. So he says, well, how can I clean myself? And she tells him the procedure of wudu. He purifies himself, and then she gives him the ayahs of the Quran that they were reciting. And then Sayyidina Umar, he goes to, he asks his sister where the Prophet ﷺ is. And Sayyidina Khubayb radiallahu anhu, who's there at the time, they tell him where the Prophet ﷺ is. He was in a house near the Mount of Safa, and he goes there to the Prophet ﷺ. When he knocks on the door, Sayyidina Hamza radiallahu anhu is inside. And Sayyidina Hamza looks and he sees that it's Sayyidina Umar, and he says, Ya Rasulullah, it's Sayyidina Umar, and he's come with his sword as well. And he says, if he comes in, if he wishes good, then it's all good for him, and if he wishes evil, then I'm going to deal with him. Yeah. Because Sayyidina Hamza was also one of those mukhattatun, giant of a man, almost 8 foot tall. He was known as a person who used to wrestle with lions. Yeah. We see kittens and we get scared, don't we? Sayyidina Hamza radiallahu an, lions, he used to wrestle with lions radiallahu an. So when Sayyidina Umar enters, the Prophet ﷺ says, let him enter. And when he enters, the Prophet ﷺ takes hold of him and he says, oh Umar, accept Islam now. and he makes dua to Allah, oh Allah, guide him. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu reads the Shahada, becomes a Muslim. It's the Islam of Sayyidina Umar. Look at that. He goes out with the intention of killing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He comes back being a believer and somebody in love with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the transformation and the miracle of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Seriously, it's amazing, that transformation. And it also teaches us how we should approach non-Muslims, no matter how hard-hearted they are, no matter how much enmity they have in their hearts. They may spew filth against the Prophet ﷺ, but there's still the potential of Iman within them. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ saw. He didn't look at the apparent kufr, he saw the potential Iman. That's what he saw. And so the Prophet ﷺ took those great qualities of Sayyidina Umar, and the Prophet ﷺ transformed that and turned it into a strength of Islam. And that's how we should approach this work of da'wah and spreading Islam to others as well. There's nobody that we should consider beyond the call of Islam and the da'wah of Islam. You should not look at anybody and say that person would never become a Muslim. I can't see that person as a Muslim, no matter what they look like. Piercing, tattoos, whatever they're wearing, not wearing, you'll be amazed. The power of Islam and the beauty of the Prophet ﷺ. What we need to do is at least give them that chance. These people have never had exposure to Islam and the Prophet ﷺ. Never. And how can we expect people who've never had exposure to him to be able to accept him? It's not possible. So we move on and we look at some of the things that were mentioned about the Islam of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. That Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he mentions that, and this is a narration in Ibn Majah, he says that when Sayyidina Umar accepted Islam, Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam descended from the heavens and said, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, verily the dwellers of heavens are rejoicing with the Islam of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. They're celebrating his Islam. Celebrating. In another narration, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he says, when he became a Muslim, Sayyidina Umar, the mushrikun was saying that the Muslims are equal to us today. In other words, we can't touch them. If we do anything to them in strength, meaning in strength, that they have Sayyidina Umar on their side now. So it's a massive blow to the disbelievers at that time. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he beautifully summarizes Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, and he says the Islam of Sayyidina Umar was a victory. It was a victory when he became a Muslim. His hijrah was a help because he supported those early communities in Madinatul Munawwara when he went there. And his khilafah was a mercy, was a rahmah. And he says, we were not able to make salah in the haram until Sayyidina Umar accepted Islam. Before Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu accepted Islam, the Sahabah used to hide and pray salah. Some of them, they used to take it in turns to pray salah. And they used to watch each other's backs when they were praying. When Sayyidina Umar became a Muslim now, radiallahu anhu, the Muslims openly used to go to the haram and pray there. Because they knew that the mushrikeen are not going to touch us, because they know they're going to have Sayyidina Umar to deal with afterwards. Sayyidina Hudhayfa radiallahu anhu, he says when Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu accepted Islam, Islam became like a man who was advancing with each step he took. Now that was the greatest opening. And Islam just went from strength to strength to strength after that. And he says, when Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu was martyred, Islam was like a man who was turning away and only increasing in distance. Now he's receding and receding and receding. That strength was taken away. And there's much that we can mention as well. It's mentioned that he accepted Islam in the month of Dhul Hijjah, in the 6th year after the Prophet ﷺ declared his Islam. So the Prophet ﷺ was 46 years of age at that time, and Sayyidina Umar, he was around the age of 26 at that time. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. We mentioned about the migration of Sayyidina Umar to Madinatul Munawwara. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm not going to repeat that. But we know of his bravery and his bold approach when it came to the migration. When we look at his virtues, so we've talked about his description, we've talked about his lineage, we've talked about his outer qualities, but his reality is truly his inner reality. And that is what was mentioned about him by the Prophet ﷺ and by the other Sahabah al-Kiram. He was one of the 10 given glad tidings of Jannah, by the Prophet ﷺ, who are known as the Ashara al-Mubashara bil Jannah. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he was a close companion of the Prophet ﷺ. Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajhul kareem, he mentions when he sees Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu after he's passed away, just before him being buried. Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajhul kareem says, what a great loss. He says, how many a times I can recall the Prophet ﷺ fondly mentioning those times that he spent with Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ used to say, I remember when I went to such and such a place with Sayyidina Umar, or with Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Me and Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, we did such and we went to such and such a place. That was the first reflection that Sayyidina Ali had about Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, indicating to his closeness with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what we also see from Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu is the products of Sayyidina Umar. We mentioned Sayyidatuna Hafsa, the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar, the great scholar and Sahabi of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's also who's called the 5th Khalif. Umar bin Abdul Aziz. He's from the grandchildren of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. So great individuals that come forth from this family and the tarbiyah of Sayyidina Umar. In terms of Sayyidina Umar, we see some qualities that resemble or similar, that liken him to Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. In terms of his boldness, his kind of forwardness in the way that he used to speak and he used to deal with issues. And there's the narration of the Prophet ﷺ when he's talking about the questioning of the grave. And the Prophet ﷺ is sat with the Sahabah, and he says to the Sahabah that when you enter into your graves, the angels will come and question you. And they will ask you, who is your Lord? And what is your religion? And what did you used to say about this man? Referring to the Prophet ﷺ. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu asks a question. He says, Ya Rasulullah, will our intellects be with us on that day? Will we have our minds with us on that day? And the Prophet ﷺ says, yes. Sayyidina Umar says, it's fine then. I'm okay. Because he says, when the angels come, I'm going to ask them. I'm not going to give them an opportunity to ask me. And some of the Sahaba later on, when Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu was veiled from this world, they say they saw Sayyidina Umar in his grave, and they saw the angels come and question him, and they said to him, who is your Lord? Sayyidina Umar stood up and he said, no, who's your Lord? Tell me who your Lord is. You're questioning me? I'm from the Sahaba of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That was Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. We also take from the narration, we mentioned about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam dreaming about Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned on the authority of Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he says that whilst I was sleeping, I saw myself in Jannah, and there was a woman making wudu beside a palace, and I asked, whose palace is this? The hadith of Sayyidina Umar's palace. And it was said, Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. At that time I remembered the possessiveness, it's translated as possessiveness of Sayyidina Umar, and so I turned back. And Sayyidina Umar began to cry. And he says, could I have ghayrah for you, Ya Rasulullah? So that was one of the dreams of the Prophet ﷺ. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu narrates that the Prophet ﷺ said, whilst I was sleeping, I saw myself drinking milk until I saw it flowing through my fingernails. So the Prophet ﷺ is drinking and drinking and drinking until it's flowing out to his fingers. Remember, when we're talking about the sleep of the Prophet ﷺ, this is the soul of the Prophet ﷺ going and leaving for a different dimension now. And the Prophet ﷺ mentions that when I sleep, my eyes are closed and they are asleep, but my heart never sleeps. He's still in a woken state, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He wasn't absent-minded. In other words, if you were in his presence and you were to say something, the Prophet ﷺ would have heard you. He would have been able to recount and tell you exactly what had happened whilst you apparently thought that he was sleeping. So when the Sahaba were collecting his sweat to mix in their perfume, don't think the Prophet ﷺ didn't know what was going on. He knew what was going on. So the Sahabah, the Prophet ﷺ said, then I passed the container of milk to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, and then he drank. And they asked the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, what's the interpretation of this? And he said, knowledge. And the ilm, he takes it directly from the Prophet ﷺ, and he takes a great portion. Sayyidina Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu anhu, he narrates that the Prophet ﷺ said, whilst I was sleeping, a group of people were shown to me wearing shirts. Amongst them were those whose shirts reached their chest and beyond that. So some shirt were up to here, some were up to the belly button, some were beyond that. He said, I saw Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, and his garment was dragging on the ground. His shirt was so long, it was dragging on the ground. And so the Sahaba said, Ya Rasulullah, what's his interpretation? He says, it's Islam. The Islam of Sayyidina Umar completely encompasses him. Everything, he is shrouded and covered in Islam. There's nothing other than Islam in Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Every single point of consideration for him. His whole life, his eating, his sleeping, his family, his wealth, it's all Islam for Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And the Prophet ﷺ also mentioned that, O son of Khattab, meaning Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, by him in whose hand my life is, meaning Allah, by Allah, he says the shaitan does not meet you traveling on a path, but he would travel on a path other than your path. He takes a different path. That's it. We're walking, we see like a gang, or for us Asians, you see a dog on that pavement, we cross over, don't we? We cross over straight away. What does the shaitan do? When he sees Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, khalas, he flees, runs a mile. He's off on the other path. And this is a sign that those that are with Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, and on the path of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, they're upon the truth. And those who cannot stomach Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, they're with the shaitan. They cross over. And this is why there's some people who won't even go. This is how mahroom they are. They won't even go and give salams to the Prophet ﷺ in Madinatul Munawwara just because they know Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhuma are there. They won't even give salams to the Prophet ﷺ. They don't even go there. They don't stand before the Prophet ﷺ. Mahroom. How much? But why are they? It's not that they don't go there. The reality is that they're not allowed to go there. Only those that are called go there, don't they? Only those that are given permission stand in front of the Prophet ﷺ. Not even the angels. 70,000 every day. 70,000, not just 70,000 in the morning, 70,000 in the evening. They come, these angels come 70,000, they come and give salams to the Prophet ﷺ, and they go, they're never given permission to come back again. Once in a lifetime. That's it. Even the angels have a limit, they have a permission to go and greet the Prophet ﷺ. So these people, they don't go and greet the Prophet ﷺ just because Sayyidina Umar is there. And the reality is because of their nafs, because of the shaitan that they are carrying, will not allow them to stand in the presence of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. They can't take it. It's like kryptonite to Superman. They can't handle it. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he is what we mentioned, his name Al-Faruq, the differentiator between truth and falsehood. If you're with Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, know that you're on the truth. It's a title given to him by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you're against Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, know that you're with the shaitan. You've crossed the road from Sayyidina Umar and you're with the shaitan, on the path of the shaitan. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that verily Allah has embedded truth on the tongue and the heart of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And goes on and on. This is where we come to the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that if there was to be a prophet after me, it would be Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, except that there will be no prophet after me. In other words, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the prophets in the realm of the souls, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses the prophets. You cannot be a prophet by your choice. It's something that you are chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that if Allah was to choose another prophet, Sayyidina Umar would have been one of those that would have been chosen. And then he would have obviously had those qualities of prophets as well. But Sayyidina Umar radiallahu an, one of the things that he had, which was one of the qualities of the Prophet, obviously to a lesser degree, and we say, and what the understanding of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is, that any of the miracles of the Prophets, apart from the Quran, can be inherited by the awliya of their time. So any of the miracles from a Prophet can be inherited by the awliya al-kiram. Yeah. And so this is one of those, that the truth would manifest on the tongue of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And it goes on and on. Another beautiful narration is that the Prophet ﷺ said, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu is a lantern of the people of Jannah. In other words, he gives light to Jannah. He illuminates Jannah. His presence does. And just a final one to mention, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he mentions that there is no angel in the heaven except that it venerates Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, and there is no shaitan in the world except that it runs away from Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And we go on and on. If we look at some of the ahadith that were narrated by Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, then we just to focus on two. That the two collections, Imam Bukhari's collection, it opens with إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. And there's a hadith narrated by Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. That is the first hadith. Or the other hadith that we see, the famous one, just on that one, Imam Nawawi opens his 40 hadith, Arba'een, and Nawawi with that hadith, the hadith of Sayyidina Umar. He also opens his Riyadh al-Salihin with that hadith of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. The other famous hadith in Sahih al-Muslim is the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam. And we see here the focus of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam on Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Because if we look at this hadith, there are many other Sahaba present during that hadith when it took place. The famous hadith, Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam comes as a student to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he asks him 5 questions. He asks him about Islam, Iman, Ihsan, when is the end of time, and what are the signs of the end of time. Those are the questions that he asks. And this hadith takes place near the end of the apparent life of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. If you look at the end of the hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, "Atadri man as-sa'il ya Umar." He says, "Oh Umar radiallahu anhu," didn't address any of the other Sahaba. He said, "Did you know who that questioner was?" And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu says, "Allah wa rasuluhu a'lam." Allah and the Messenger know better. In other words, I don't know. He says, "Innahu Jibrilun atakum yu'allimukum dinakum." That verily it was Jibreel, he came to teach you your religion. But you see there how the Prophet ﷺ specifically addresses Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And Sayyidina Umar narrates that hadith. One of the sayings of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu is nisful ilmi husnul suwal. The half of knowledge is good questioning, knowing what question to ask and when. If we look at some of the key events in the life of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, one of the most amazing ones is really the expansion of Islam within his time. And it reaches greater borders and further borders than ever before. Islam under Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, it comes to the borders of Turkey, it crosses over the Red Sea, and it goes all the way up to Libya. If we look at towards the east, we're talking about reaching the limits of Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, that area. That's how much. If we look at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, then it's really limited to the Arabian Peninsula. It's Saudi Arabia, it's Yemen, presently titled Saudi Arabia, although I don't like using that name for that blessed land. The Hijaz, Yemen, Oman, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, those areas. You have, that's as far as it kind of goes. But under Sayyidina Umar now, expansion. Persia. And all of these lands now come into, and it's a misunderstanding. People think, Sayyidina Umar, he went over there with his sword and he dispatched armies to these places. No, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu first would write treaties of peace to these places. And this was the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? He used to write letters to the leaders He used to address them with respect. You know, the Prophet ﷺ never used to speak to the leaders, even though they were, they were oppressors, with disrespect. Yeah, he wouldn't. It's not the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ would address them with respect and would invite them to Islam. And we know, for example, one of the ruler of Persia, what did he do with the letter of the Prophet ﷺ? He ripped it to shreds. And the Prophet ﷺ said Allah will rip up his empire to shreds. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah. Sayyidina Umar was exactly the same. He would write letters and he would send peace treaties that give us permission to spread Islam into these lands. We're not bloodthirsty people. We don't want to, go through and kill, because that defies the objective of da'wah. The more people you kill, the less they are to become Muslims. Yeah. So it's only when that was refused and the freedom of Islam, of religion, was denied, that Sayyidina Umar would then dispatch armies. Yeah. And under his leadership, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave immense futuhat, immense openings to Islam. It's probably expanded more in the time of Sayyidina Umar. If we look at percentage of expansion, in the time of Sayyidina Uthman it expands even more, but that's on the back of the achievements of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Yeah, it's under the back of that. And he does this all in about 10 years. 10 years Sayyidina Umar has spread Islam to immense boundaries radiallahu anhu. From amongst it also is his taking of Masjid or Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem. And the way that happens is that the priests, the Christians at that time who had the rule of that land, when it was written to them that hand over control now to the Muslims, because the Muslims are now in control of that land, they refused. They said, we will only give it to the leader of the Muslims. He has to come himself and we will hand over control to him. Because it was written in the previous books that the land will be given to one who will be its rightful owner, and some of the descriptions were about him that he will have patched clothing. This was some of the descriptions. And what happens is Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he leaves Madinatul Munawwara to go to the blessed land of Palestine, and he's with one of his slaves, and they have one camel between them, and they take it in turns. So for a certain distance, Sayyidina Umar rides, slave walks, and then they swap over. Can you imagine that? As a leader, when they get to the land of Jerusalem and they're about to enter, it's the slave's turn to ride and Sayyidina Umar's turn to walk. The slave says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, let's swap, that's fine, it's your turn because you're about to enter. They need to know who you are. And he says, no. He says, justice. And Sayyidina Umar is about justice, isn't he? He says, it's your turn to ride, you're going to ride. And so he enters to collect the keys and the rule of that land whilst his slave is on the camel and he's walking. Allahu Akbar. Look at that humbleness. It reminds you of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Man tawada'a lillah rafa'ahu Allah. The one who humbles themselves for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises them. Allah raises them. So you see this humbleness of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, when he sees that area is covered in rocks and stones and it's dust and it's dirty. Sayyidina Umar himself goes and he cleans up that whole area. He says, this is the place where the Prophet ﷺ led the prophets in prayer. This is the place where the Prophet ﷺ went on the Isra wal Mi'raj. And it was also another incident that takes place, it's time for Salah. And the Christians invite Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu into their church to perform his Salah. They invite him in. And Sayyidina Umar doesn't refuse because he says, look, it's a church and I don't want to pray in your church. Look at Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. He says, if I come and pray in your church, then the later Muslims will fight over this masjid and lay claim to it because I prayed in it. And I don't want that to happen. This is your right. This is your place. And so Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he prays outside on the land. He doesn't pray inside the church. Subhanallah. That's what we would have done, wouldn't we? We would have said, this is Sayyidina Umar prayed here, we want to take control of it. You Christians leave. He knew what kind of people were going to come at the end of time. So he protected the rights of the Christians, not only then, going into the future as well. And it shows that Islam is not about, the way that the Copts, ISIS are dealing with the Coptic Christians in Egypt, or the way that Christians are being treated in Syria. That's not from Islam. It's not the way of the Sahabah al-Kiram. And for anybody to lay claim and say these groups now are following the way of Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Siddiq and Sayyidina Umar in terms of their killing, a'udhu billah, you have people who make those claims, they don't know history. They don't know Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. They don't know what kind of protection. There's certain churches that have a letter from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I was reading it on the BBC. There's one of the oldest functioning monastery in the world. And they till today, they have a letter hanging there of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in their church, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave them protection and told the Muslims not to harm the Christians and to let them worship as they're worshipping. Allahu Akbar. That's the tolerance of Islam. That's the freedom of religion under Islam. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he is the opener of those lands. He takes those lands. When we look at some of the miracles of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he himself is a miracle, as we mentioned. He's a walking, talking miracle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But we see the famous narration of the Sahabah al-Kiram when they go to a place called Nahawind, and they go and they fight there with the non-Arabs. And when they're there, and it was a great distance, number of months of journey away from Madinatul Munawwara, and Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu is giving khutbah at Jum'ah on his mimbar, and he sees from that distance that the Muslims are about to be ambushed. That the Muslims are in a valley, and that the armies of the kuffar have surrounded them from the top, and that there's only one route to escape, that's through the mountains. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu is standing on the mimbar, and he addresses one of the Sahaba, the generals of the army at that time, and he says, Ya Sariya al-Jabal. O Sariya, take the mountain. Take the mountain. And he hears two miracles here. One that Sayyidina Umar sees them, and he calls it out. The other one that the Sahabi hears. What do the scholars say? If this is the state of the Sahabi, what must the state of the messenger and the master of the Sahabi be? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. People try and limit the hearing and the sight of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the rank of Sayyidina Umar from Madinatul Munawwara. He's seeing those lands and he's able to see that. Imagine what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam could see. And as Ibn Qayyim, he mentions in his book Kitab al-Ruh. What does he mention in his Kitab al-Ruh? He says the soul of the Prophet ﷺ is so immense and so grand and great, it's greater than the universe itself in size. This is a student of Ibn Taymiyyah. Student of Ibn Taymiyyah. So when people talk about Hazir, Nazir, and can the Prophet ﷺ see or hear, can he be in different places? The reality of the matter is not that the Prophet ﷺ is in different places. Reality of the matter is that the entire universe is in front of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. That's how it is. He doesn't need to go anywhere. Where's he going to go for this dunya? The dunya comes to him sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He's not going to go anywhere. He doesn't need to move sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And so Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, another beautiful narration. He says Qais bin Hajjaj narrates that when Egypt was conquered, the people of Egypt came to Sayyidina Amr bin al-As radiallahu anhu, who was the governor, and it was their first day of their auspicious month of their calendar. So these people were non-Muslims. Egypt was now in the control of the Muslims. And they say, "Oh Amir," they say, "verily the Nile River has a need which causes it to flow." And yes, what is it? They said, when 11 days of this month pass every year, we approach a young virgin girl from her parents, and we ask from her parents, by compensating them, we adorn her with beautiful clothes and jewelry that we can find, then we throw her into the Nile River, the river Nile. That's what they used to do before Islam. And so Sayyidina Amr bin al-As radiallahu anhu, he says, Islam does away with these kinds of beliefs. And this is how Islam works, that when it comes to a land, it doesn't obliterate everything. It doesn't say that when Islam spreads to your land now, you need to speak Arabic, you need to wear a jubbah, you need to wear a turban, you need to eat camel's meat. Yeah, or if if Islam spreads to you from Pakistan, now you need to wear salwar kameez, you need to learn Urdu, you need to eat biryani. Yeah, that's not what Islam says. That's culture. The culture of the Chinese is respected. Their architecture is respected. They dress how they still dress. They're still Muslims. Africa, you go to Africa, you look at the way the Africans dress, the way the food that they eat. Africa, their culture is still preserved. Islam doesn't obliterate culture. It refines it. It beautifies it. And it removes anything which is harmful to the belief of the people or their well-being. And so Islam did away with this tradition, but the river didn't flow. River didn't flow. It's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that will these people revert back to their old beliefs. So Sayyidina Amr bin al-As radiallahu an, he wrote a letter to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu an, and he says, "Ya Sayyidina Umar, this is the situation. Every year they give a sacrifice to the river and it flows. This year we've told them to stop because we're Muslims now and it's not flowing. What do we do?" Then Sayyidina Umar wrote a letter addressing the Nile River itself. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he says that from the servant of Allah, Amir al-Mu'mineen Sayyidina Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, to the Nile of Egypt. He says, if you flow from your own accord, then don't flow. We don't need you. If you're in control and you want to flow whenever you want to, don't flow, we don't need you. But if Allah is causing you to flow, then I ask the Allah Almighty to cause you to flow. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, take this letter, throw it into the Nile. So Sayyidina Amr bin al-As radiallahu anhu, he takes this letter and he sends it into the Nile begins to flow again. Subhanallah. When we look at the khilaf, sorry, what time is the other? 10 minutes. 5 minutes. Time, inshallah. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu was a possessor of these great qualities, a great benefit to Islam. And the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us these great qualities, these great individuals, is so that we can be like them and serve Islam like they served Islam as well. If we take Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Uthman, Sayyidina Ali out of the question, Islam would not have been where it is. Each one gave their contribution to the legacy of Islam. Each one added their mark on this blessed religion that we have. It's their contributions, their sacrifices, their hard work that we have Islam as we have it today. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu is also in his khilafah, which it takes place in the 13th year of Hijrah. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, as we mentioned, appointed by Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. There's no question basically. Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq appoints him, that under his leadership he introduced new systems of governance that were not seen before. Such as welfare for people that had disabilities, welfare for widows, welfare for single parents. You see Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu putting in checks and balances within the marketplaces, rules and regulations. He started regulating trade. And this is why Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, that he wouldn't allow people to trade in the suq of Madinatul Munawwara until they had learned the fiqh of trade. You couldn't do it. You needed a license. And what was your license? You understand the rules of buying and selling. And this is why we fall into the issues that we fall into. Because before marriage we don't learn about marriage. Before trade we don't learn about trade. Before travel we don't learn about travel. We don't know the rulings of how to travel. How does it impact our salah? How does it impact our fasting? All of these things we don't. Whereas Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he didn't leave any of that to chance. He made sure that everything was regulated and systemized and organized. Sayyidina Umar, and Islam really flourished, and many of the later civilizations, in fact it's attributed, a lot of the welfare systems that we have in England trace back to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu and his systems. And this is why they're successful, because they took on the good qualities that were left behind by the Sahabah and the Prophet ﷺ, and they implement them, they follow them. In our countries we don't. We've kept the name, we've lost the reality. And these people, they've maintained the reality even though they don't have the name. It's like one of the scholars, from Egypt when he traveled to England. And when he went back, he said, they asked him, what did you see? He said, I saw Islam without Muslims. And he says, when I've come back here, I see Muslims without Islam. In other words, they follow Islam. They've got the justice, the rules, the regulations, the system, everything, the healthcare system, everything. They don't call it Islam, they don't call themselves Muslims, but they follow, more or less what Islam has taught them. And he says, when I've come back to our own countries, we have Muslims, but there's no Islam here. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, within those years, we've already mentioned about the battles that take place, and how Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh expands the borders of Islam to greater lengths in every direction. South, east and west especially. I mean, the north was already more or less taken care of in terms of Yemen, Oman, and all of those lands. If we look at the passing away of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, he passes away at the same age as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh, at the age of 63. That's how closely was the following of Sayyidina Umar of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And when he was martyred by a Magian slave. He was a non-Muslim. And he had issues basically with Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. He felt that Sayyidina Umar was unjust with him. And so he came to the masjid, and it was time of Salatul Fajr. And it's mentioned that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu in Salatul Fajr, in the first raka'ah, he used to recite a lengthy surah like Surah Yusuf. And Surah Yusuf is a lengthy surah, just to give people enough time to catch the Salah of Fajr, just to give them time. Imagine if our Imams were to read Surah Yusuf. It's a beautiful surah. Yeah, it's beautiful. Surah Yusuf, one of the most amazing surahs you can read. But imagine, they'd be boycotted. Yeah. He'd have complaints. He'd be on his own. People would break their salah and go home. This is their salah. This is the secret of their victory. As Sayyidina Umar is praying, and when he enters into the salah, this Abu Lu'lu, his name was, he comes and he had a twin-edged knife, and he harms and he stabs about 13 of the Sahabah before he even gets to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Seven of them pass away. Yeah, between 6 and 7 of them already pass away. And then he stabs Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Yeah, the Sahaba, one of them, they take their cloak and they trap him in their cloak. Yeah, and when they trap him in the cloak and he knows he can't go anywhere, he commits suicide, he kills himself. Yeah, that's what you do. So these kind of like suicide bombings, whose sunnah they're following. Not the way of the Sahaba to behave like that. Yeah. So Sayyidina Umar asks, who was it that killed me? When it's told to him, he says, Alhamdulillah, that Allah did not make my killing at the hands of somebody who claimed to be a Muslim. Yeah, at least he wasn't a Muslim. And then when he's in his final moments, it was over the next few days that he suffered from the wounds that were afflicted to him, he asked his son, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar, to go to Sayyidatuna Aisha radiallahu anha. And he says, go and ask her for permission for me to be buried next to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. But look at his humbleness. He says, when you go to her, do not say Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu asks, because it may be that because of my title, because of my rank, she gives permission. Say Umar humbly asks that he be given permission to be buried. Sayyidatuna Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, I wanted to be buried in that place. Yeah? And from her haya, she could still be buried because it was her husband and her father there. She could still be buried there. But now Sayyidina Umar is going to be buried there. She doesn't want to be buried there. Out of haya. Doesn't want to be buried there next to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. So she gives permission for Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu to be buried there. Even then, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, out of his humbleness, he says, when I pass away and you go to take me, then knock and humbly ask that Umar, these are his words, we say Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, but Umar is asking, O mother of the believers, for permission for him to be buried in your chamber next to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. She grants permission. Yeah? And he says, if she refuses permission, then go and bury me with the rest of the Muslims. Yeah? Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. So There's a narration of the Prophet ﷺ where the Prophet ﷺ in Sahih al-Tirmidhi, the Prophet ﷺ, when we mentioned this about Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, but we'll end on this, that the Prophet ﷺ enters the masjid with Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq on his right, and Sayyidina Umar al-Faruq radiallahu anhu on his left, and he's holding both of their hands. And he says, like this we will live upon this earth, and like this we will enter into the grave, and like this we will stand on the Day of Judgment. The prophecy of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's it, khalas, sealed by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Already told him where he was going to be buried and who he's going to stand with. So the love of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu is the love of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we cannot deny the contribution of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu to this religion. And he has done a great favor over us. You know, we should remember him, and whenever if we recite any of the Quran, we should send the reward of its recitation to the prophets, to the Sahabah al-Kiram, to the Ahl al-Bayt of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we should remember these individuals. Yeah, it is a great calamity and a great injustice if we forget them. Really, you know, we've done a great injustice if we forget them. If we do not pass on knowledge about them to our children and to our families, it's a great injustice, because what we need is people who walk and talk the way they walked and talked, the way they served Islam, the way they behaved and sacrificed for Islam. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He rewards Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu on our behalf for his sacrifices for this religion and the great benefit that he brought to this ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam looks upon him with his pleasure sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to visit Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu and pay our respects to him and to be with him on the Day of Judgment, Ya Rabbil Alameen.